right now, we're going to turn the mic over to Molly Johnson. Molly lives in the San Luis Obispo County in California, which is the site of the Diablo Canyon nuclear power plant, which is located just 24 miles away from her home as the crow flies. She's been an anti-nuclear activist for nearly 40 years, working on issues related to nuclear weapons, nuclear power, uranium mining, radioactive waste, and the transport of nuclear waste. Her expertise spans the entire nuclear fuel chain, and she's worked on many of these issues as well. She's a member of the San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace, which is an activist group opposing the Diablo Canyon power plant. So I will turn it over to Molly.
I'm going to talk about the links in the nuclear chain, but I'm not going to talk about anything technical. What I'm going to talk about is the people, because the nuclear chain affects people. So when I first became involved in nuclear issues, I thought the story was about power, weapons, and waste. Over the years, I learned that it was about people. Every link in the nuclear chain is people. Every link has a human face. A miner, a mill worker, a downwinder, a tribal elder, a reactor neighbor, a waste site community, a child, a grandchild. My hope is that when you leave today, you won't remember just the nuclear chain. You remember the people whose lives are forever connected to it. Although I knew about uranium mining, I'd never stood beside a uranium mine, nor had I ever heard firsthand from the people whose lives had been forever changed by it. That changed in June of 1999, when my husband and I attended the 10th annual Indigenous Environmental Network Protecting Mother Earth Conference at the Laguna Pueblo near Mount Taylor. Indigenous leaders from around the world gathered to speak about uranium mining, nuclear weapons, and environmental justice. We met near the Jackpile Paguate mine, once the world's largest open pit uranium mine. Much of its uranium fueled the U.S. nuclear weapons program during the Cold War. For the people of Laguna Pueblo, it left contaminated land, shattered traditional ways of life, and generations of illness. One of the most unforgettable voices at that gathering was Dorothy Purley. She told us, before the mine, we had clean water, we had clean air, we gathered our herbs and medicines. We never imagined that the mountain itself would become poisoned. What the government forgot to tell us was that the uranium was dangerous and would become hazardous to our health. They did not tell us that it would also bring death and destruction to others. Dorothy worked at the mine herself, driving ore trucks and operating an ore crusher. She described men coming home covered in yellow uranium dust that settled throughout their homes and into the lungs of their children. She spoke of daily blasting that shook the village of Paguate, crops and food contaminated with radioactive dust, contaminated grazing lands, and families devastated by unusually high rates of cancer and other diseases. She told us this was a time when our village women would dry their fruits and vegetables during the harvest season. A fine layer of radioactive dust would cover our food, but we simply rinsed it off, not knowing it was toxic. Then she spoke about the people she loved. One by one, she had lost nearly every member of her family. As she stood before us, she herself was dying of cancer. Her words had a profound effect on me. I thought I understood uranium mining before that. I did not. Dorothy devoted the final months of her life to telling the truth about what uranium mining had done to her people. She died just a few months later in December of 1999. I have never forgotten Dorothy or the lessons she taught me. The nuclear story begins long before a reactor ever produces electricity or a bomb explodes. After uranium is mined, it is sent to a uranium mill to be processed. My understanding of uranium processing comes largely from Bradley Angel and Green Action for Health and Environmental Justice in California's Bay Area. For many years, Green Action has stood alongside the White Mesa Ute community of the Ute Mountain Tribe in southern Utah. White Mesa sits next to the last operating conventional uranium mill in the United States. Community members believe the mill has become far more than a uranium processing plant. It's steadily becoming a dumping ground for the man-made radioactive waste from across the world. Through Bradley, I've had the privilege of meeting many members of the White Mesa community and listening to their stories. They speak not only about contamination, but about the loss of sacred places, burial grounds, medicinal plants, and a way of life that has sustained their communities for generations. One of those is Elder Thelma Whiskers, who has lived in White Mesa her entire life. She speaks not first as an activist, but as a mother and grandmother. I am worried about my kids and my grandkids and the future in White Mesa. When I think about the mill, I just feel like I have to fight. I have to stand up for my family and my community. After nearly 7 decades of living beside the mill, she offered another simple but devastating truth. I've lived here 67 years. For so many years, that mill has been there, blowing dust and polluting our air. We can smell it. We want it shut down and cleaned up. We want our community protected. Sitting with these elders changes you. Looking into their eyes and listening to their stories changed me. Their resilience deepened by my understanding that every step in the nuclear chain has human consequences. Between uranium mining and a nuclear reactor or nuclear weapons lie several industrial steps. And I'm not even going to say what I was going to say because Linda covered this so beautifully. I'm just going to say this. A reactor or a nuclear weapon is not the beginning of the nuclear story. It's just one more link in the longer chain. So for the last 20 years, much of my work has been focused on nuclear power, especially Diablo Canyon Nuclear Power Plant. I am a board member of San Luis Obispo Mothers for Peace. We have opposed Diablo Canyon since its inception. For more than 5 decades, we have done far more than simply speak out against the plant. We have served as formal interveners in NRC proceedings, challenging license renewals and raising concerns about safety, seismic hazards, planning, radioactive waste, and radiation protection. We have repeatedly pressed the Diablo Canyon Independent Safety Committee for answers and greater public accountability, and we have brought cases and participated in proceedings before the California Utilities Commission. Our work has meant many years of 10 hearings, reviewing thousands of pages of technical information, questioning regulators and industry experts, conducting independent monitoring, and insisting that the public's health and safety is not overlooked. Our work, today we continue that work, challenging the push to extend Diablo Canyon beyond 2030 and working to ensure that the plant closes in 2030 as California law requires. For us, it has never been simply about being for or against nuclear power. It's about accountability, public health, environmental protection, and the responsibility we have to the generations who will live with the consequences of the decisions made today. As an all-volunteer organization, Mothers for Peace carries an extraordinary workload, but after everything I have seen, from uranium mining to radioactive waste, I believe we have a responsibility to ask those questions. This work has become far more than something I do. It's who I am. And every day, as a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, I think about the responsibility that we all share to leave our children, our grandchildren, and all our future generations a safer world than the one we inherited. Diablo Canyon, just one more link in that chain. From 1996 through 2000, I traveled twice a year to the Nevada test site for gatherings organized by Healing Global Wounds and the Shundahai Network to protest the testing of nuclear weapons. There I stood with Western Shoshone leaders, downwinders, Hibakusha, veterans, faith healers, and people from around the world whose lives have been forever changed by the nuclear age. We learned together, we prayed together, and sometimes we crossed into the Nevada test site in peaceful acts of civil disobedience. I was arrested there, not because I wanted to, but because there are moments when bearing witness matters more than remaining silent. One of the people who had the greatest impact on me was Western Shoshone spiritual leader, Western Carney. Every morning before sunrise, Corbin's hand drum would call us to prayer. He reminded us to begin each day by honoring Mother Earth, singing to her and to all the animals on the land and the birds in the sky. He taught us this. It's in our backyard. It's in our front yard. This nuclear contamination is shortening all life. We're going to have to unite as a people and say no more. We, the people, are going to have to put our thoughts together to save our planet here. We only have one water, one air, one Mother Earth. Almost 30 years later, I still sometimes wake up to the sound of Corbin's drum calling us to circle. So the line between nuclear power and nuclear weapons is much thinner than most people realize, and both begin with uranium, both leave behind radioactive waste, both leave contamination, living with the same question, who will live with the consequences? My work on man-made radioactive waste began in the mid-90s when I served on the San Luis Obispo County Nuclear Waste Transportation Committee, where we researched and evaluated the transportation of both low-level and high-level man-made radiation waste from Diablo Canyon to a repository that had yet to be established. We attempted to find the answer to one of the greatest unanswered questions in the nuclear chain. What do we do with the waste? That question is still unanswered. In 1996, I was asked to travel to Ward Valley, California, where a supposed low-level radioactive waste dump was being proposed. I was asked to help organize a children's gathering hosted by the Save Ward Valley Coalition and the Fort Mojave Indian Tribe. Soon after that, I became the office coordinator for the Save Ward Valley office in Needles. It began as a short-term commitment, 3 months, became 4 of the most important life-changing years of my life. For those 4 years, I worked alongside the Fort Mojave tribe, the other Colorado River Native Nations, and more than 80 environmental organizations. Stop the dump. In February of 1998, we began a 113-day occupation of the proposed dump site. We lived together in the desert with people from across the country and across the world, sharing food, work, laughter, fear, and determination, and knowing every day that we could be arrested. We became a community. Many of us became family, and we won. Ward Valley became my classroom in Indigenous leadership, environmental justice, courage, and perseverance. But more than that, it changed the course of my life and deepened a commitment that has stayed with me ever since. Nearly 30 years later, my husband and I still return to Ward Valley every February. We were married there on February 20th, 1998. Yes, that is our wedding picture. We were surrounded by members of the Fort Mojave Indian Tribe, members of the other 5 Colorado River tribes, fellow activists and friends. And we return every year in February to celebrate that victory and reconnect with the people who became family. And in fact, a bunch of them call me auntie now. I have to say, I cried the first time Larry called me auntie. I can proudly say there's no radioactive waste dump at Ward Valley, or nor will there be one in the state of California. We won, and Ward Valley changed us forever. And by then, I understood something I really hadn't understood when I first became involved in nuclear issues. The nuclear chain doesn't end when electricity is generated. It ends with man-made radioactive waste that someone, somewhere, must live with essentially forever. So the gatherings at the Nevada test site were not only about ending the weapons testing, but they were also about stopping the proposed Yucca Mountain high-level radioactive waste repository. I am still working with Ian Zabarte down there in the corner. We have worked together 30 years now, and Yucca Mountain keeps raising its gnarly head. For the Western Shoshone, Yucca Mountain is far more than a proposed waste site. It's a sacred place, protected under the 1863 Treaty of Ruby Valley. They have long argued the federal government never had the right to make that decision without their consent, nor the moral authority to turn their homeland into the nation's dumping ground for the most dangerous man-made radioactive waste ever created. Scientists, too, have raised serious questions about whether Yucca Mountain can safely contain highly man-made radioactive waste over the immense time periods required. The problem has never been simply finding a hole in the ground. It is how we protect people and the environment from radioactive materials that will remain hazardous for thousands, and in some cases, hundreds of thousands of years. And the problem has not gone away. Yucca Mountain was never completed, and there is still no operating permanent repository for the nation's high-level man-made radioactive waste. So, after more than 40 years of nuclear power in California and decades of nuclear power across the nation, we still have no permanent solution for the most hazardous waste this industry produces. The waste remains where it was created, as we are at Diablo Canyon, increasingly accumulating. That was one of the realities that we were confronting in the desert gatherings decades ago. We were not simply finding one proposed repository at Yucca Mountain. We were confronting a much larger question. What are we leaving behind for the generations who will have to live with the radioactive legacy of our nuclear age? Today, that question remains unanswered. For me, Yucca Mountain reinforced a lesson I had been learning throughout this journey. The nuclear chain doesn't end when spent fuel leaves a reactor, simply transfers the burden to another community. Another important link in my work has been the Alliance for Nuclear Accountability, a nationwide network of more than 30 organizations working to hold the federal government accountable for the impacts of nuclear weapons production, man-made radioactive waste, and nuclear energy. Through ANA, I annually participate in DC Days, meeting with members of Congress and their staffs to advocate for communities affected by uranium mining, nuclear weapons production, commercial nuclear power, radioactive waste, and environmental contamination. One of the most important lessons ANA has reinforced for me is that there is no clear dividing line between nuclear weapons and nuclear power. They are all part of the nuclear chain, connected by uranium mining, fuel production, transportation, waste, policy, governments, and the communities that bear the greatest risk. These experiences have changed me forever. They taught me that the nuclear chain is not just about reactors, bombs, or man-made radioactive waste. It's about people. It's about communities that have been sacrificed, promises that have been broken, and generations who continue to live with contamination long after the headlines have faded. Most of all, they introduced me to an extraordinary people whose courage, wisdom, and determination continue to inspire my work every day, many of whom have become lifelong friends. When I look at my great-granddaughter, Skylar Rose, I realize she and hundreds of generations after her could inherit the responsibility of safeguarding this deadly waste for longer than recorded human history. That thought breaks my heart. As Skylar so simply says, I want you to leave me an earth I can live on. After nearly 40 years of advocacy, I remain committed to educating the public and policymakers about every link in the nuclear chain, and working with communities across the country to protect public health, future generations, and the environment. And before I close, I want to alert you to something that affects every one of us and all future generations. Trump's executive orders direct the NRC to weaken radiation protection standards to accelerate nuclear expansion. Even though the NRC affirmed in 2021 that there is no known safe radiation exposure. This is not about being anti or pro-nuclear. It's about protecting our health and future generations, especially women, unborn babies, infants, and children. Please visit protectbetter.org. You will learn how to make comments, which are due by the end of the month. And this, I jumped into this project with both feet, even though we are fighting Diablo tooth and nail, because this got the mama bear in me. I'm a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a great-grandmother, and I believe that we never do anything without thinking about the next 7 generations. So thank you for your time, your attention, and your willingness to care about the links.